You are here, and so am I. Good afternoon. Is the light okay?
Yeah, it's very bright.
We're very bright people. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. So nice to see so many people on the floor. Literally and metaphorically. I'm Philippe Vergne. I am the director of MOCA, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you and to welcome Doug Aitken for this conversation on the weekend of the opening of what is the first survey of Doug's work in North America, the world of North America. The world of MOCA. We're going to make MOCA great again. This exhibition started about 2.5 years ago when I came to Los Angeles, and Doug and I knew each other before, and we started a conversation about how can we think of the museum a little bit differently, think of exhibition a little bit differently, exhibition where time, space can actually either contract or expand. It took a few people I want to thank. I want to thank my entire team here at MOCA for their effort in bringing this exhibition together. One person among many people in particular is Anna Katz, who was my assistant on the exhibition and who was absolutely incredible in bringing a lot of research and deadlines together. But let's jump in. As I thought about our conversation, Doug, you really thought about the way you change before I jump in question, anything you would like to address?
No, keep going.
Okay. About the way you change, you transform the entire museum inside, and you are known for actually projecting from the museum with projects you have done in Washington or in Seattle or in Pittsburgh, where the work is on the skin of the museum. And here I have the feeling that we actually did almost the opposite and we expanded the museum from the inside and brought, for instance, Migration, that was conceived as an outside piece, inside. And then this idea of expanded art or expanded form that I would like to organize this conversation around, because if I look at your work, and I think when you walk through the exhibition, you can see that what you have done over 20 years of work is develop an idea of expanded cinema, expanded sculpture, expanded narrative, expanded time, to some extent extended studio practice, expanded music, expanded architecture, and maybe some place where, I'm not sure we're going to go there, I'm not sure you'll be comfortable, but maybe expanded biography. And I also would like in our conversation to focus on a group of work that are present under our roof, so that you might have experienced them already and you will be able to see them, and in order to trace a little bit of a crescendo in your work. And I would like so the body of work that I would like to discuss, if we have the entire time, is our Diamond Sea, Electric Earth, Song 1, Sonic Fontaine, and the upcoming Underwater Pavilions that would be premiered at the end of October, underwater, off Catalina Island. So the first one I would like to ask you about is Diamond Sea. It was your first multi-screen immersive work, and so my first question would be first, how did it come about? How did you hear about this idea of this mine that you are describing in the installation? Can you just start at the beginning?
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. to start at the beginning. And no, and it's amazing being able to kind of share these works with all of you. And I think in so many ways, the works in this exhibition, most of them have not been shown in America or haven't been shown in a long time. And when you work with time-based mediums, pieces exist when they exist. They're not on walls, they're not in crates. You kind of set them up and they live their life. And to be able to have this constellation of works in Los Angeles, this kind of composition, a choreography of works for me it's never really happened in this way before. So to actually see this in a location that I used to come to, taking the RTD bus to visit shows when I was a teenager, that's just amazing.
Diamond Sea.
Okay. Well, to talk about Diamond Sea, which is from 1997, this is a work which I made. It was the first piece that I did that really looked to kind of go past the screen. And I want to rewind a little bit more. When I first moved to New York, I had this really horrible studio. It was like 10 feet square with no heating, no cooling, no doors, no windows. Like a rusted box or something. And I had this idea. I knew one person in New York. And my idea was that I would get there and I would create an artwork every week, and from concept to finish. And I had this idea that you would just make work. You'd make ideas. You just make them. And it wasn't about something which is precious. It was kind of always about new terrain and experimenting. And I think at a certain point I was working in this practice, and I found myself limited by the mediums that I knew. And the mediums were physical sculptures or casting things. And that led me to the moving image. It led me to something time-based. And very rapidly, I saw the potential of time-based mediums and the fluidity, the ability to embrace audio and architecture and things like that. And going back to Diamond Sea, that was the work for me that was really, it kind of punctured the screen. It kind of opened up this aperture where the idea of a concept could suddenly become something that was porous, that the viewer could navigate and really piece together their own narrative. So I think in some ways it kind of came out of a restlessness.
Maybe describe actually what Diamond Sea is, and how did you get... Diamond Sea is, we need to say that you went to Namibia.
Yeah, so the process of making Diamond Sea, the work was filmed in southern Namibia. And at the time on the map, it was simply called Zone 1 and Zone 2. And it was approximately 70,000 square kilometers, which is a very large parcel of land. I don't know, maybe that's a quarter of California. And this area was closed off since 1908. And the more research I tried to do, the least I could find out. It was kind of pre-internet. And I realized it was a very kind of closed off region. And eventually I realized that in this area you had this kind of incredible contrast. You had these diamond mines, the Sahara Desert, the oldest deserts in the world, gem diamonds almost kind of sitting on the surface of the sand, and then this enormous area with no humans and no access. And what took place inside was almost a kind of like a future city. It was these machines that they created that would sift through the diamonds using almost no workers at all. And it was very kind of 2001, and I was very interested in that kind of contrast and dichotomy between this extremes of a very synthetic, man-made occupation in this landscape that was very, very primal in a way.
What was the most fascinating aspect to you? The diamond on the surface of the floor, or the total absence of human being there?
I wasn't really interested in the diamonds at all. I was interested in the idea that this kind of fence and space itself that was closed off to the tempo of Western culture was kind of moving on its own speed and kind of creating its own systems. And I saw that there was a possibility to make a work where whatever we found within this restricted area would become the narrative. I didn't want to go there with a preconceived notion of creating a documentary or authoring something that I had already conceived of.
So did you follow the geography of the land and started to shoot from your journey through the land?
Yeah. Yeah, it was very process-based.
Was it? Were you following a specific geography on the map, or geometry on the map, or it was? Or did you? I thought you mentioned that we were installing that at some point you almost created a system to explore the land and just take what you would see as the object of the work.
I was very interested in the idea of the camera being something that was passive, that was kind of surveying the landscape, as opposed to really trying to author a narrative. And I think the narrative kind of, it was kind of alchemy. The narrative kind of came into the work, and it kind of structured itself in a certain way.
For me, that's almost the closest of piece in your career to a documentary. Did you have the idea of actually documentary filmmaking, or expanded, or creating a documentary that was not a linear one and could exist in space, in 3 dimensions? You have to know, if you haven't seen the installation, that you have 1 monitor, 3 projections, and 1 light box. So it creates an entire room. So it's almost a documentary in 3 dimensions in real time.
Yeah. But I think I always saw it as a psychological landscape. I always saw it as something different than a document. And you know, I think for me, I'm not quite sure that line between fiction and nonfiction. And I think oftentimes in works that is, you know, it's a gray zone.
Nature comes back over and over again in the work, but a very specific nature. It's nature which is about to be, it's always, for me it's always ambiguous, but you might not look at it the same way, but it's either being destroyed or being rebuilt. And on Diamond Sea, for me, there is also this ambiguity between a land that is being either artificially built or is the object of man-made entropy. Where do you stand?
I'd like to pass that question to someone else.
Okay.
No, I think when you talk about the idea of landscape, I can't help but look at migration, which is behind us. You know, and you know, I think a lot of these works they deal with the idea of landscape, but you know, for me, it's not so much the literal landscape. It's hello. Did I just turn this off?
You just did.
Hello. That's good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I think kind of going back to the idea of landscape, that was a kind of core concept for this exhibition. You know, we're in the space which used to be where police cars came to be serviced. You know, before it was a museum. And I mean, I think everyone here kind of knows the Geffen very well. Probably many of you back when it was the Temporary Contemporary. And you know, this space it's wide, it's open. There's many possibilities. And I think when Philippe was initially talking to me about this exhibition, you know, I thought about the idea of the space, and I've always been very interested and inspired by the space. But at the same time, I felt that, you know, is there a way to disrupt it? Is there a way to kind of transform it? And I started thinking about this idea that, you know, could you have an exhibition where you kind of step inside and the idea of place and the idea of time kind of dissipate, and the idea of the narrative, the kind of programmed museum where you walk through a sequence of rooms, they're highly controlled, a chronology in a sense, disappears. And I wanted something that really kind of empowered the viewer and allowed the viewer to kind of get lost and be absorbed in these different narratives, these different artworks. And I think in the end, I really wanted the idea of the viewer to kind of author their own experience, and for that to be different with each and every person. So bringing that back to narrative, or bringing that back to landscape, really, you know, the museum, I think, is a landscape. I mean, all these spaces, they're all there, and they're always transforming.
Let's move then to a urban landscape. I'm going to try to keep you on track.
It's impossible.
I didn't succeed over 2.5 years, so there's no reason we should start today, actually. You have, I mean, for me, the question of, you mentioned it, the viewer editing the work, you know, almost physically as they walk through either the museum or one of the pieces. And for me, as I started to discover your work more than 20 years ago, this idea of editing in space, or editing that many visitor can simultaneously edit the work in the same space, having this notion of simultaneous vision really became extremely clear with Electric Earth, which was in 1999. And to describe Electric Earth for you in the room, which is in the other building, it's an 8-screen installation where you enter, you have a first screen with a young man sitting in a motel room, and then you follow this young man throughout a journey in an empty city, or a city which is only full of sign, and you are actually walking through the city with him. Again, I will go back to what I want to pull out of you is how did it started, and all this. I'm very interested in the form that you create, because I think you are one of these rare artists who there is no ambiguity. You create a form, and a form that is made out of light, moving image, and sound. So from your encounter with this young man, who you're going to describe, how do you create this multi-screen form that allows this experience?
Well, I think to talk about the Piezoelectric Earth, I think that work for me really, it came out of a very specific concept. And the concept was looking at the idea of the kind of world around us and the speed of it, the acceleration, and this idea that the viewer, that we are kind of constantly moving in harmony and also out of touch with the speed of everything. And I think with that work, I wanted to find a way to take that idea and to humanize it, to create a character that the viewer could kind of inhabit and move with. And the work itself, the architecture of the work really kind of came out of that, the idea of having multiple rooms, you know, because I saw it almost like chapters in a book where you're kind of moving and pushing through these different chapters of a day to night through the eyes of this person who's as if he were the last person on Earth, and kind of has this awakening in twilight and starts moving through the city streets, and everything around him is pulsing with electricity and kind of throbbing and changing, and that sense of kind of emptiness and synchronicity.
Tell us about him, because as often you, and I think it's a real skill, you identify people who come with a fascinating skill or a fascinating talent, and you formalized it in a piece which is not in the show called The Source, where you interview people about their creative process. But this young man there comes with something which is very unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd like a demo, please.
How do you describe that?
Well, I think in that work, I wanted someone who could really, you know, kind of dance in a certain way that was felt very fast and mechanized, and you know that went back in that piece to, you know, pop locking and early breakdancing, and you know I had met Jiggy a couple months earlier, and you know, as that idea developed for the piece, I thought, you know, I really want to work with someone who can kind of become the landscape. They can kind of become this modern landscape. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways, that's how the idea of dance and choreography became part of the architecture of the work.
How did you meet him?
We met in New York, and I was filming something else, and I didn't know that he could really dance like that, and you know, we were just talking about something, and he started doing these moves, and you know, I remembered it. I was very fortunate. We brought him out here and, you know, made the piece very rapidly. And I think, you know, it's interesting also to talk about process because, you know, many of the pieces in this exhibition have taken different durations to create. And you know, some pieces are very, like, rapid and immediate, and they're kind of intuitive. You kind of are filming yourself and you know every next move. And then other pieces that take years to kind of conceive, and you know you're kind of in this swamp and things are muddy, and you start finding ingredients and bringing them together, and eventually the work starts building its language and the work builds itself. And you know, it's one of the things that I noticed when I walk around here, because it is, you know, it's incredibly bizarre for me to see your own work and a lot of it in one place. I have this kind of condition, I think, where I'm always convinced I have no past at all. And, you know, so there's only today. And I find myself walking around a situation like this, and it's quite bizarre.
You talk about and I'm going to jump there and digress a little bit from where I was going, because you mentioned pieces that take time to develop. How does your process work when you're in the studio? Because you work in many mediums. Photography, sculpture, collage. How do you reconcile these different lines in your work? You showed me as we were working something that for me was very impressive, because you just say, you don't have a past. Or you have the feeling that you don't have a past, which is true. When we started to work on the show, and I told Doug, we're going to look at 20 years of work, and your first answer was like, there's not much there. And thank God, because where would we be today? So glad there's not that much. But you show me this document where you have this kind of lines where photo works develop and sculptural work and then film works. Is there a hierarchy? The collage, for instance, that you did for Sleepwalkers in New York. How do you, does one trigger another, or it's totally simultaneous?
No, I've always felt that, I think that creativity, to kind of use a broad word, I think that for myself, it's never been a straight line. It's never been that you make a body of work or one work and it leads to another. I've always kind of been interested in this idea of simultaneity, and I think if you were to kind of draw a structure or look at a metaphor, you almost see a tree, and in this tree, it might be that, at the core of it, the roots of it, the root system are certain questions you have, certain ideas that you kind of can't shake and you're always working with. But at the same time, the branches of that tree really become, for me, they become projects. And, one project might be something that we're working on for 4 or 5 years. And it's a slow burn, and it's something that just takes an incredible amount of time. Another project might be something you can make fast, and it's loose, and it's almost kind of physical, and I think what happens in that way is, you're working in a nonlinear way, but there's also, you're working with time, you're sculpting time, and time becomes a very essential component of creativity as opposed to just the concept, and I think you can use that. In the back room here, the very last piece in this exhibition is a piece called Sonic Pavilion, and the Sonic Pavilion, I think we've completed it about 8 years ago. And this work, in the work, we drill approximately 700 feet into the earth. At the bottom of this hole is a series of geological microphones and accelerometers. And they pick up the sound of the tectonic plates as they're moving and shifting. And this is a live artwork. It's something which is in Brazil now, as we speak, amplifying some kind of sound, some kind of audio signal of what's underneath us. And I think in a lot of ways, art is also a bit like that metaphorically. It's this thing which is kind of always moving. It's underneath your feet. You kind of don't quite know, where it's going, but it's alive.
There is something that I like this idea of always moving, and I think there is a line in Black Mirror that says, I don't remember it, but never stop, keep moving. But this idea of permanent move, and that's something that I felt a lot in the studio. You have to also understand that when you go to Doug's studio, you're not going to a painter's studio, you're not going to a sculpture studio. You're going to this very, I don't want to say strange, but it's very specific. It doesn't look like a studio, it doesn't look like an architect office, but it's a beehive of people working with you, around you. And I have the feeling that permanently you throw ideas on the table, and as there is this group working with you permanently, I don't know how you describe that, assisting you, but bringing all these ideas together. And I mean, I was actually I've rarely seen that, a restless mind that is endlessly producing ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about the studio life and process? Or it's private?
No, it seems like nothing's private.
No.
But the studio, the idea of the studio practice, I think I never really connected with the idea of the kind of white wall, concrete floor artist studio space, and I always had a vision for something quite different. I saw that, for me, art making really comes back to ideas, to concepts. So I wanted something that was fluid, not solid. I wanted a space where things could happen and they could be time-based and there could be many things happening at once, many mediums happening at once. So the space that Philippe's talking about, you kind of walk through from room to room and maybe in one space over here we're constantly editing things or working on audio, architecture, and things like that. And I think another aspect of that is the idea of making works that will break and kind of collapse. And
what do you mean?
Well, I think there's kind of always projects that we're working on which they're not precious, and they're not made to be finished. They're made to be experiments, where you're really kind of testing ideas, or you're testing the limits of a certain concept in a way. And I like that very much. I don't mind spending a few months working on something that never sees the light of day.
Actually, we might.
That's why there's no light in here.
Let's go to Washington, and because that's the project that you did there. Song 1, which is that you can see in the other room, which is for me the vortex of the exhibition, the circular projection. Was the first iteration of it was on the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, so on the Gordon Bunshaft building. For me, there is something extremely moving about this piece. First, because it's in a public space, and not any public space, at the mall in Washington, D.C., that's in front of everything that makes democracy seemingly possible. There is something about this piece that, and it's not a pun, but you cannot take your eyes away from it. And for me, that goes to a very specific quality of your work, that aesthetic decisions that woo people in and then make them think. Can you describe a little bit how do you develop this work? How did you pick the song, because it's not any song? And how was it to make a building disappear?
That's 3 questions.
I know. I'm using my credit.
Well, I think Song 1 was something that that project happened. I went to D.C. and we were talking about doing something there, some kind of project at the museum. And we pulled up in a taxi, and I opened the door, and it was dusk, and I saw this kind of enormous concrete building, a brutalist architecture, Gordon Bunshaft. This museum has, I think, only one set of windows on the exterior. Love to actually see the museum do something, not something inside the museum. And I kind of, for a flash, I kind of saw the exterior as this space, this kind of negative space, this space that could be used and activated in some kind of way. And I think the project really grew out of that. And going back to the work itself was funny, because the piece deals with repetition in many ways. Obviously, you hear this song, and it's repeated and repeated. I think we re-recorded about 45 or 50 versions of this. And I found myself, when I was working on that project, I spent some time in the studio kind of in lockdown, and I had too many ideas for the project, just the reams and reams, like hundreds of pages of notes. And I kind of went through them, and I just was throwing them away and crossing them out. And I think I'm addicted to music or something, but I had music playing in the background, and this music was repeating. I just put on repeat mode for like a day or so. And as I was kind of throwing away my thoughts, I thought about this idea of the music itself. And I thought that, really in the 20th century, we have these contributions to culture, which are rock and roll, the pop song, cinema, film. And, one of the things which is most viral, which is most nomadic, is the song, the kind of perfect architecture of the perfect pop song. So I thought about that, and I gravitated towards this song, written in the late 1920s, I believe, I Only Have Eyes for You. And I was very interested in the architecture of this song and how it could kind of become polygenerational. It could be something we could still hear now, and it was covered and covered and covered over and over. And that idea of repetition I find fascinating. Repetition in contemporary culture, but also in art making. So I thought, what if all these ideas that I have, we remove them, and we just take the idea of one song and just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And we use it as a way to kind of map an urban condition, to go from person to person and situation to situation.
I'm taking notes for the next question. I will go back to the music, but because it was so much at the beginning of our conversation, and you mentioned the museum and wanted to be outside the museum. Do you have a problem with museums? That that you want to expand on the museum, and it's of course I smile, but it's for me and for I think all my colleagues who work in museum, it's a very important question. Mm-hmm. Why would an artist like you actually would like to challenge the museum? What are the limits that you see in museum that you think we need to overcome?
Well, I think in some ways it's almost less about the museum itself and more about the distance between the viewer and the object, the viewer and the artwork. And I think in many ways, when we look at cinema, it's a very passive role. We sit in a comfortable chair in darkness and we watch a single screen. But at the same time, we find ourselves walking through an institution, and we walk into a room of paintings, for example, and we choose the blue one because we like blue, or we respond to this Gerhard Richter, not that one. And that space in between, the space in between you, the viewer, and what's being viewed, that's the area that I'm interested in. And is there a way to kind of work with that, or short circuit that, or find other possibilities? And I think a project like Song 1, for example, or the Sonic Pavilion, they're looking at kind of activating different approaches, different strategies to kind of create more of an immediacy with what it is, with the concept, a different kind of connection.
There's something in the way we've been working that was very, I think, challenging for us, but that I think we have been at least learning a lot from, is this ability to that you brought to the process to actually be extremely reactive. Like you see something, it's interesting, you grab it and you make it happen. And decided to also think of an exhibition as a platform that doesn't, that of course has a beginning and an end, but that the protocol itself of the exhibition could be a bit challenged by saying, oh, let's bring these people in and see what they can contribute to the project. I want to talk to music a little bit more, because you mentioned pop music, but the range of music that you actually traffic in is way broader than pop music, and I actually like what you did. I mean, of course, I like what you did, but the way you describe Song 1 and I Only Have Eyes for You is to apply to pop music the logic and the structure of minimal art or minimal music. And I would like us to tell you a little bit about an experience you made available for me a few weeks ago when Doug, a few weeks ago, kidnapped me and we went to visit the musician Terry Riley. And in many ways I see Terry Riley and music as the main influence or the main trigger of your work. So why Terry Riley, and what have you learned from him?
Well, I think, talking about the musician Terry Riley, who, I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with on quite a few projects. I think when you look at his approach or his body of work, it's very wide from, creating minimalist music to electronic music to the first raves, the first performances that go from dusk to sunrise, and the kind of elastic qualities of the artistic practice. I want to kind of use as a jumping off point to talk about disruption. And I think one of the things, it's been wonderful working with Philippe, and one of the things about the museum that I think I'm very interested in is having moments that are kind of destabilizing or disruptive, and also using the museum as a kind of stage or a film set. And what I mean by that is I really want, now that this exhibition is up and it's here and you're here, and I could live here for a little bit of time, I really want to stage moments where things happen here that are unannounced, that are unstaged, that are impromptu. There's a piece, These Restless Minds over here, that deals with these rural farm auctioneers. One of my favorite of them, Eli Detweiler. We want to bring him out here and on some date, which I can't tell you, just have him moving through the museum, doing auctioneering chants mixed with observations of everything around him for the afternoon. We want to have a musician like Terry Riley in here towards the close of the show, improvising to different pieces and kind of owning them and reinterpreting them. And I think in a lot of ways, like, I see this show in a very non-precious way. I see this exhibition as something that is about giving away these ideas. And you know, if you can take a piece and if you want to, if you can take it and eat it, that would be a dream. So.
Speak wisely. Sorry, the eating thing just disrupted me. Disruption and music. I really want you to spend also a little bit of time talking about sonic fountain. You physically disrupted the museum. You made a hole in the museum. You brought water to the museum. Everything which is absolutely forbidden to do. You are a registration nightmare, and for the better, to make us progress. But it's not. It's disruption, but it's also. For me, I see this piece, and I hope you have seen it, as using the museum as the instrument. Because your collaborator, Austin Meredith, which I think is in the room somewhere, has tuned with you the piece. Again, my question will be, did it come out of a desire to produce music in an expanded field with no traditional musical instrument? What was the first impetus behind the sonic fountain?
Well, I was really interested in the idea of excavation, kind of pulling something apart and opening it up, and this cycle which exists within the work appears to have repetition, but there's kind of infinite variety and patterns within that. And I think this also happens. It happens in many of these works. Many of these pieces, I think, if you strip away the image, there's a structure underneath. And this piece, Migration, that we're looking at right now, this piece appears to be shot in a hotel with different animals. But in fact, we shot this work mostly across America. Every hotel, every room is in a different city or town. A different creature is introduced in it. But the repetition in this work is deceiving. It feels like it goes nowhere. It feels like the room is serial. It's the same. But that was exactly the point for me, that I could drive 2,000 miles and be in the same place and look at this kind of this system, and the system that we have created, the system of in a situation like this, a largely repetitious landscape, a sense of sameness, the idea that you check in, you check out, you check in and fall asleep and wake up and you don't quite know where you are. It's just familiar. And I think about that a lot. I think about how we've kind of created a landscape that is so divorced from the kind of organic landscape that it was born upon. And so a piece like Migration is, I think, as much dealing with minimalism and repetition and structure as a piece like the Sonic Fountain that might appear to be in a more explicit way.
And but I want to go back to Sonic Fountain. It's composed. And I would like you to maybe, because when I was visiting the exhibition yesterday as a visitor, I was listening people talking about the piece, and half of the people in the room thought it was recorded, and it's not. It's live. The water produced live the sound. The rhythm of the drop is both serial and geometrical. Can you expand a little bit on the way you have, with Austin, composed this piece of music? Mm-hmm. Water music.
Water music. I like it when you explain.
Well, the way I see it, the way I hear it is there is almost an attempt, a little bit like the piece which is at the entrance of the exhibition called Don't Think Twice. The two neon sign, fluorescent light with these two concentric circles that interact together, and the repetition of the motion of the light exhausts all the formal possibilities of the line running through these two circles, almost as if they are a circle in the water. And I see, I might be wrong, the composition of Sonic Fountain as another attempt to exhaust all the possibilities of the geometry offered by the valves. Yeah. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, transversal, the periphery, the square. So both vertical and horizontal music. Mm-hmm. Doesn't make any sense, huh? That's okay. That's what we do, curators. We don't make sense much. Some. Let's stay in the water. Yes, let's stay in the water. As we were talking about the exhibition and working on the exhibition for the last 2 years, Doug, I think in this idea of disrupting the museum, presented the idea of doing something outside of the museum, not on the skin of the museum like you have done in Washington, but far. We took another trip together. We went to visit Double Negative in the Nevada desert. So Doug presented a project that for me was the true continuation of the work that artists like Michael Heiser, who did Double Negative, or Smithson, the Earth artist. And you presented this idea of installing off Catalina Island 3 underwater pavilions made of mirror, diamond-shaped, that will be for 4 months, conceived as sculpture, of course, but also ocean observatory. And to do that, we're collaborating with an organization named Parley for the Ocean. And I don't know if Cyril is in the room, but I want to see if he's here. I want to thank him for really embracing this project. Tell us about the underwater pavilions.
Yeah. This work is something we've been working on for quite some time now. And it's 3 pavilions that will be underneath the ocean surface. Different elevations and heights, and these pieces are buoyant. They float. They create kind of enormous kaleidoscope caves. They also create ecosystems for sea life. And I think in a lot of ways I was very interested in this project, and I wanted to create something, as Philippe had mentioned, that existed outside the museum, but something kind of drew me towards ocean, and the idea that we kind of have this huge expanse in front of us, a space which is over 70% of the world is underwater. And I was interested in this idea of penetrating that, having something where the viewer steps in and under and kind of goes into these works. The works change. They change continuously due to the light, due to the tides, the circulation of water, the sea life. And in a sense, you have something which is both a perceptual encounter, but it also becomes an ecosystem in a way. So this is something which I'm a little bit tired this morning because we were at the Fabricator early this morning looking at these pieces, and it was kind of this great moment where you kind of walk in and you're standing inside this space, this kind of strange cave-like geometric space, and just thinking about how it can come to life in a few weeks. So, anyways, I hope you can all make that also. It will be on Catalina Island, and we're hoping to have these ready in early October.
Late October.
Late October.
Late October.
Right.
I think.
Of 2020.
2020. One more question about the expanded biography. And if you don't answer, that would conclude our presentation. How much? And the only reason I am asking is because we were, as we were installing, you kind of made a joke about that, about not a joke, you commented on it, about whether or not your own biography is active, present in the work. I see, we have friends in common in some of the work. Your family is, your mother and father are in one of the work. How much of subjectivity, how much of your own is in the work? How much do you share of yourself through the work? That would conclude our presentation.
But I would like to, I'd like to call someone out tonight. The artist Doug Wheeler, who is an incredible light and space artist. And the first time I ever went to this museum ever, I was quite young, and I walked up to the mezzanine here, and before me was a space which had nothing. And it was a kind of infinite space. And you take your shoes off and you walk into this, and it just looked like it went on forever. It was kind of this white, dim color modulating. And that piece was so seminal. And it's kind of interesting how you have this cycle, this life cycle. You find yourself back in the space. I came in today and I saw Doug in the parking lot. And he's here tonight. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for coming. Again, I want to thank you, Doug, for everything. Doug also mentioned that Eli, the auctioneer, will come to this exhibition to give a tour. This is next Thursday at 6 o'clock. So be here. Thank you so much. We can turn the sound up now.